working of a biological neuron. A biological neuron is the basic unit of any brain, either it's human brain or any other animal brain. And the artificial neuron is imitation of the working of a biological neuron. So it is important to understand the working of a biological neuron. So a biological neuron looks like this. It has three main components. This is called as cell body, right? And these are called as dendrites. These lines are called as dendrites. And this is long tube like structure is called as axon. So let us see the working of these three main components of the biological neuron. So this neuron receives input through these dendrites. The input comes to the neuron through these dendrites, right? The sources of input may be other neurons, that means this neuron receives input from other neurons, or it may receive input from the sensory receptors or sensory organs like ear, nose, tongue, or skin or eyes, right? So input comes from those various resources. Let us call this input, let's say this is x1 coming from some sensory organ or some other neuron. Let's say this is x2, this is x3, x4, so on and so forth. Now not all the inputs are of same importance, right? So some inputs are more important, some inputs are less important. So depending on the importance of the inputs are connected via what is called as weights. So we put weight on the dendrites, like let's say this x1 is connected with weight w1, right? x2 is connected with weight w2, so on and so forth. So more the importance of the input, more is the weight, or thicker is this dendrite. This dendrite becomes thicker and thicker as this input, depending on the importance of this input. After receiving these inputs at the cell body, what this neuron does is it does the weighted sum of these inputs. So that means we multiply this x1 with w1. It is like this: x1 w1 plus x2 w2, input into weight plus other input into that weight plus other input into that weight, so on and so forth. If there are n inputs, we multiply all those inputs with weight and do weighted sum. Now what this cell body, or there is something called as nucleus in this cell body, what it does is, after multiplying and adding all these weights, if the total sum is greater than some threshold, then this neuron produces an output in the form of electrical signal, right? So if the total sum is greater than some threshold, then this neuron produces an output in the form of electrical signal. And if the neuron produces output, we say that the neuron is activated or the neuron is excited. And when the neuron produces output, that output is carried through this axon, right? And that input is taken to the other neuron like this one, right? So these lines here are called as axon terminal. The axon is branched at the end, right? Axon, there are branches of the axon at the end, right? Axon is branched at the end, and through these branches the output is carried to the other neurons, right? So that is how the biological neuron works, and the artificial neuron is exactly the imitation of the working of this biological neuron. So let us see the artificial neuron now. If I represent the biological neuron as in a very simple way, we have this nucleus, or we have the cell body. These are the dendrites, right? The input is coming through this dendrite, right? We are associating weights with these inputs, So then we have the axons here. So these are axons. Of course, there is only one axon, but at the end the axon gets branched. That means there are branches of the axon at the end. That is called as axon terminal. Right. So the output is sent. Same output is sent from here. Same output is sent from here. Same output is sent from here. So here, what is this neuron doing? This neuron is doing some weighted sum, and on top of that, it is getting activated, or it is producing output. So this is the work. This is how we can represent biological neuron in a very simple way. Now artificial neuron, let us represent artificial neuron. Artificial neuron looks exactly similar to this. We have this cell body of the artificial neuron, and then there are the inputs coming here. So x1, x2, x3, x4, this is w1, w2, w3, w4, these are weights, and then here we do sum of these inputs and weights, weighted sum we do, and then this artificial neuron produces output, right? Same output is sent to other neurons. So here in artificial neuron, we perform the sum x1 w1 plus x2 w2 plus x3 w3 plus xn wn. So this sum is represented like this. Now one more thing is there in artificial neuron, that is called as activation function. On this sum we apply what is called as activation function, that is here, and that depending on activation, the result of the activation function, the output is sent to the other neurons. So we have the sum here, and on that sum we apply the activation function. There are different kinds of activation function like sigmoid activation function, ReLU, etc. So these are applied on this sum, and the result of that application of the activation function, the output is generated, and that output is sent to the other neurons. Right. So this is how artificial neuron is very similar or approximately similar, though the biological neuron is very complex, but this artificial neuron is approximately similar to the biological neuron.